Alright, so here is creatine part 2. Last video was about how creatine works. And this video is about how you can get it. And how much you need to take at that. Creatine is stored inside of our cells. And it's very similar to carbohydrates. When we eat carbohydrates, we can store them as muscle or liver glycogen. However, we only have a finite capacity to store glycogen, and any excess will be turned into body fat. For creatine, we only have a finite capacity to store creatine, and any excess is simply just excreted in the urine. And to maximize your creatine stores, there is a different protocol than to maintain them. There are two very common methods to increase and fully saturate our creatine stores, meaning there are two ways to store as much creatine as our body can handle. The first is a loading phase, in which you ingest between 20 and 25 grams every single day. With that being said, the body only has the ability to absorb and utilize a few grams of creatine at a time. Therefore, in a loading phase where you're taking 20 grams in a single day, you would want to divide this up into between 5 and 10 doses throughout the entire day. And during this creatine loading phase, it would take between 5 and 7 days to fully saturate your creatine stores. And then in order to maintain these stores, it's recommended to take between 3 and 5 grams a day. With that being said, they do highlight there's an alternative of taking 3 grams of creatine every day, and you will fully saturate your stores by about day 28. But if you very quickly need the improvements supplied by creatine, you may want to try the loading phase. However, if you have an extremely meat-heavy diet, you may be very close to saturated and only need between 3 and 5 grams a day. And this is because the only form of dietary creatine is going to be found in meat, because animals store creatine just like us. And as you can see, there's 4.5 grams in a kilogram of steak or salmon or herring or venison. There's 4 grams in a kilogram of tuna, 3.4 grams in a kilogram of chicken, there's 5 grams in a kilogram of pork, and 3 grams in a kilogram of cod. So if you've been eating over a kilogram of meat every single day, you may be quite close to saturation. And if you do a prolonged loading phase, you may just be wasting creatine. But unfortunately, there's no good at-home test to know this, which is why unless you need increased creatine stores extremely soon, for example, if you're in close proximity to some sort of sporting event, or as I mentioned in my last video, if you're trying to recover from some sort of sporting event or head trauma, and finally, if you have some sort of neurodegenerative disease, in which the sooner you can get the creatine into your brain, the better. But once again, for these conditions, they're using upwards of 30 grams per day. With that being said, most people, in order to utilize as much of the creatine as they ingest as possible, would probably be sufficient taking 5 grams a day. And in order to absorb as much of this as possible, I recommend spacing it out into between 2 and 5 servings every single day. With that being said, there are some important caveats. Exercising individuals have a higher rate of creatine turnover, meaning they would likely need to be on the higher end of creatine intake daily in order to maintain adequate stores, such as between 5 and 10 grams. Additionally, larger individuals may benefit from going over 5 grams a day. And for smaller individuals, they may only need about 3 grams. With that being said, given that you space it out adequately, going over the recommended intake does not appear to have any deleterious effects. And many doctors who specialize in the way that creatine impacts the brain feel extremely comfortable recommending doses of 20 grams per day to impact brain creatine stores. Additionally, it appears that ingesting creatine along with carbohydrates and protein can increase creatine stores. This graph is also indicative because vegetarians have extremely low creatine levels. They are able to maintain about 100 because the body does naturally produce creatine. But without any dietary or supplemental creatine, it's not sufficient to maximize muscle creatine stores. Additionally, if you want to be very detailed about where the creatine absorption is occurring, exercise specifically in the muscle group that is exercised enhances creatine storage. And this is simply thought to be due to enhanced blood flow to the working muscle. And this is when creatine is ingested post-workout. And post-workout creatine appears to be more beneficial than pre-workout creatine. Therefore, if you're going to take creatine only once a day, it's recommended to take it after a workout. And I really do think those are the only talking points I had for today. But creatine is an absolutely fascinating subject, and more research is coming out on the daily. It's one of the safest and most well-studied supplements specifically for athletes, and has a myriad of effects on exercise performance and cognitive function. And I hope these last 2 videos teach you why creatine is beneficial, and what strategies around dosing, timing, and source you could employ to get some of the beneficial effects of creatine. And if you're ready to take control of your health and energy, send me a DM to sign up for coaching.